I think they have very interesting insights, and the floor is now open to questions. We will ask, we will encourage students to come forward and first identify themselves. Any questions from the floor? Questions from the students, or kung walang questions sa students, the other members of the audience. Si ano daw, si Gary. Gary, would you like to start? Probably while waiting for questions from the floor, I really appreciated the observation that we are not very good in keeping records or in sources, especially the contemporary part of our history. In fact, even presidential papers, they should be properly handled. In the US, I know presidential papers are really kept, but here in the Philippines, some are found in the National Library, like the Quezon Papers, but there's some which are not still released by families, like the Garcia Papers. They're still with the son-in-law of President Carlos P. Garcia. So that's really a problem. So if in the executive branch you have that kind of a problem, lalo na sa judicial, so I really, it makes it very difficult because you need evidences to corroborate your assertions. Because if there are no evidences, it's really a difficult task. But secondly, yung concept of biographies, I don't know. The Americans, they love biographies. They love biographies, either artista or political figures. But here, I noticed that the only biography that we have that are usually done by foreigners. There seemed to be a problem of, revealing things with fellow Filipinos, and Filipinos open themselves easily to foreigners. So, for example, I'm referring to the book Anarchy of Families. If you look at all the words there, they're written by foreigners, Americans particularly. So there is that kind of, historiographical problem which confronts us Filipinos. Then the third part is there is a hesitancy to write a very recent past. It's still fresh. That's why some historians will love to write about the Spanish period. Pero yung contemporary, ang daming skeletons in the closet. Like, for example, the information revealed in the books of Marites really are, mind-boggling. We see Puno, we assess, we see her in a new light because he's so, revered, or let's say, but he had pala this dark past of being part of the martial law period. So siguro meron din ganun hesitancy itong mga tao na they don't want to reveal that dark past of theirs. And therefore, hesitancy to write memoirs. They prefer not to write about it. They prefer not to be interviewed, about that part of their life. So, but it's very, very important. Otherwise, we lose, information or data. It might be the dark age of Philippine history. People refuse to write, to be interviewed, to release documents, diaries, kasi pwede naman yung diary, basta siguro meron lang, okay, publish it after I die. So, you're safe. But I recognize from a historical point of view the problem of sources on this particular period. Okay, any questions from the audience? Yes. Please identify yourself and direct your question, to any member of the panel.
So good afternoon. I'm Ruth Punzalan, Block A from Dean Pangalangan's class, Conlo 2. So the title of our forum today is Ang Mga Pamana at Sumpa ng Raymond Marcos. And I guess coming from a Conlo perspective, as Dean Pangalangan has discussed, Lansang versus Garcia Javellana, and also as Dean Bacungan has also discussed the provisions of the Constitution with regard to the Commander-in-Chief powers. So those are clearly the pamana of the Raymond Marcos. But what do we think, or what do you think are the sumpa from that particular part of our political history? I guess this question goes to Dean Pangalangan.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I'll address this to the organizers. The sumpa part is about, sorry, what is it?
The legacy.
Oh, okay.
The bad and good legacy.
Okay.
Bad is the sumpa, the bad.
Okay, the legacy from those years. You know, well, thank you for the question. That is a tough one. Well, it might sound too academic, and I don't know how philosophical the organizers wish the discussion to be, but you see, especially, well, let me just focus on the legal profession. I think the profession is too inward-looking. Exactly as Professor Kamagai says, we tend to take seriously our legalese, and we accept the trite formulae of law as gospel truths. When in fact, if you read all these decisions from with the benefit of 40 years hindsight, and with the benefit of the diaries that I and Marites have mentioned, you will realize that the legal arguments were just a cover for other maneuvers which were going on. That is at one point. But at another point, perhaps also we should really take the arguments seriously. And Marcos played that cane to the hilt. And that is why, if we focus on Lansang and Javellana, it was because these decisions provide a framework of legitimacy. He called his dictatorship constitutional authoritarianism. He said that in another of the parts of the diary, he would say that we must always have a veil of constitutionalism for everything that we do. In other words, if in the beginning I said we should look beyond the legal rhetoric and see what is really happening, now the second prong for me is, but we should also take legal rhetoric seriously and see how it structures the debate, see how it legitimizes the arguments of Marcos. I was telling Dean Bacungan earlier, and I'm so glad that Marites mentioned Justice Puno. At that stage of the work of Estelito Mendoza, he had to rely on highly theoretical and academic lawyers to theorize about the validity of martial law, of the suspension of the rate of illegal arrest. In other words, and let me close on this point. The traditional libertarian lawyer, confronted with a warrant of arrest against, let us say, a student activist like Gary Olivar, The traditional response would be, okay, fine, I will defend my client. He's accused of being a communist. My reply is he is not a communist. If he wrote this paper, I will say that, oh, he wrote it as part of a course he had with Dodong Nemenzo. If he wrote this, it was part of his duties as a member of the student council, etc. If he wrote this in the collegian, it was part of his freedom of speech. In other words, it would be a purely fact-based argument and a little doctrinal argument along the way. For me, maybe the lawyers should have also looked at the larger picture. The larger picture about the place of radical advocacy within the context of freedom of speech and the constitutional order. And that is why, for me, that is why Marcos won that game. He was the only one who played that game. Everyone just regurgitated the tired old liberal theories. Marcos explored other arguments. So, for me, there was a clash. The traditional formula straight from the Bill of Rights, citing all these classical statements about freedom of speech, and then left-wing orthodoxy, which was totally oblivious to legal legitimacy, and which would legitimize their cause by their own set of slogans anyway. And Marcos knew it wasn't working, and he came in. And that is why his claim about building the new society in the Bagong Lipunan, ideology revolution from the center, for me, were not just empty attempts to at post hoc rationalization. For me, they were actually attempts to provide an ideological middle ground. Sorry, but that was a very long explanation.
Yes.
So can I follow up on your question earlier? Who wrote those 3 books of Marcos? You said they came from UP.
Well, Professor Kamagay would know that.
Memory.
Talaga naman, Marcos really wanted to change society. Yun, talagang radical, no? Yung new society niya. To the point that he had to write books to really trace why there would be a revival of the barangay and so on and so forth. So talagang tinulungan siya ng mga ibang kasabi namin sa Departamento ng Kasaysayan. Alam na yata ng mga iba kung sino sila. But well, it's a fact that this was a team plucked from members of the Department of History, and they really were given a lot of support. In fact, I knew one went to Europe to really look for data. So they were there in the National Library. They had a special room where they would write. Of course, according to them, what they also admired in Marcos was when he's given the draft of the manuscript, he really read it and did marginal notes on the draft. So he really was that assiduous naman. It may have been ghostwritten, but he really read the manuscript which came out. In fact, not the entire manuscript came out. It was overtaken by events, but they were able to come out with 3 volumes of Tadhana. Mahimig, ito yung ginuhit ng Tadhana, baga, destiny. Okay, so yun mamaya na lang kung sino-sino sila. Okay, may tanong ba sa, yes. Please identify yourself.
I'm Maria Lucas. I'm the Center for Integrated Academics. Dr. Kamagay, ang tanong ko, has anybody done a study about Class 39 of the UP College of Law? That's Marcos Bosch, no?
Parang wala pa.
Siguro magandang project sa legal history ng mga estudyante, no?
Oo, College of Law attend.
Pwede oral history yan, di ba? Buhay pa sila, di ba? May buhay pa.
May buhay pa, yes.
Oo, maganda. Material yun.
Ang experience ng third world, as far as I know,
Kasi nag-reunion yung mga batches na yan, di ba?
Oo.
Are they very close that they don't spill the beans or whatever?
makasi din bakuna, may alam tungkol doon. Meron na po ba nagsulat tungkol sa class 39 where Marcos.
Ano pong pinag-uusapan nila pag nakikita-kita sila?
Sino pa bang 1939 na buhay? Na classmates ni Marcos. So, magandang agenda yan. Research agenda. Okay. May tanong po ba, estudyante? Pakipakilala ang sarili.
Good afternoon po. Ako si Roy De Vesta from Block D sa Class B, Sir Pangalan. History major din po dito.
Yes, I remember you.
So ma'am, first comment lang. I totally agree with what you said and what Ms. Lidug said about the need to preserve our memories. Kasi may historiographical problem nga na yung sources natin sobrang kulang. For example, even the military in the US, after 30 years, they declassified the documents of the intelligence. Pero dito, diretso shredder yan after 10 years. So, may mga ganun tayong problems po. Pero siguro, this question is directed to you po. What do we have? What are the sources that we have that we can work with right now to create a picture, in order to popularize the discourse on martial law? Kasi sobrang, yun nga, in our generation, ang dami namin hindi alam. Even the historians now, they don't really have much to work with. And another question, this one is directed to Professor Pangalangan. Sir, would you think, sir, that more than just the developments of the time, sir, the 1935 Constitution itself, sir, do you think it's conducive to a dictatorship? Kasi, sir, if you look at the presidency, sir, for example, of Quezon, aside from Marcos, Quezon was a really powerful president. And the 1935 Constitution, sir, would it have something innate in it that would allow for such machinations to lead to a dictatorship, sir? Would it be that we adopted it from a time when the U.S. had a very strong presidency in Franklin Roosevelt, sir? So yeah, so those are my two questions. Thank you.
Talagang, as I said, itong martial law, it's where we're starting. It's a long process because well, it's 40 years, so it's not that distant, no? So ang history talaga parang you must have the luxury of distance with the event. So, but I'm happy to see some works coming out, especially yung mga eyewitness accounts ng martial law. Unti-unti na may mga lumalabas na yan, no? Pati yung parang biography of a family who was yung subversive. So, unti-unti. Pero yung official na sabihin mong sources, ito nga binanggit ni Marites, yung turn over ng military sa CHR, yung Commission on Human Rights. And that has not been really looked up. No? Hindi pa masyado siyang tinitignan na parang turn over lang. Yun kasi we should also get accounts of the people themselves. And yun na kasi yung memoir, hindi tayo masyadong dyan sa ganyang klaseng sulatin no? Ang memoir. Because that would have given them a chance to justify and explain their position during the martial law period. Pero hindi nga mapagsulat. And probably the culture of writing is not that advanced in us. Pero magandang tayo i-interview kasi mas oral tayo kaysa written, ano? Pero yun na nga, ang problema, as far as I know, sa experience ng third world, ang nagbukas lang talaga, nagsalita, was Birata. He was open to being interviewed. The others, like Laya, hindi yata very cooperative, and the others who were members of the cabinet, kasi sila yung talagang makakapagsalita. But, yun na nga, kaya kasabi ko sana dapat para may living history na project. When you interview them and you see their faces, being interviewed, because there will be non-verbal communication, right? When they pound their hand on the table to assert a strong point or something like that. Pero yun na nga, siguro naman as they grow older, they will be more kinder to themselves, and they would like to leave a legacy. They would like to explain their position during the martial law period. No? So at least may diaries tayo ni Marcos, no? Na naiwan. So talagang we will still have to build up the newspaper accounts, yung mga meron tayong radical papers dito sa main library, pwede rin yan tignan. So, siguro unti-unti, meron tayong written and oral sources on the martial law period. Dean, your turn.
Okay, thank you so much, Roy, for the question. Well, as Dean Bajuan demonstrated, in the 87 Constitution, we built in all those safeguards against another proclamation of martial law. Automatic review by the court, by any citizen. You don't have to be arrested to do that. Automatic convening of the Congress without need of a call. They can do it anywhere. So even if the Congress is padlocked, you can do it. But you see, Roy, I agree with you. The 35 Constitution was written for a strong president. Written with Manuel Quezon in mind. But for me, my concern, Roy, goes beyond that. So for instance, even under the 87 Constitution, Arroyo tried to avoid all the automatic checks mentioned by Dean Bajongan simply by refusing to call her state of emergency. Suspension of the writ or declaration of martial law. So she went to the court 4 times. Well, 4 times she was challenged before the court for every sort of emergency that she would declare, but she would avoid the language of the Constitution. In other words, for me, I'd rather not just look at the text. I'd rather look at the political dynamics. And again, notice again with Arroyo, she declared an emergency twice. Twice the court obliged, and then the 3rd time, in David versus Arroyo, the court said, well, we better look at it this time. In other words, for that there are many factors. There's, of course, the populist pressure. There's the fact that the person arrested was Professor David of sociology. In other words, for me, I'd rather see the language, the text of the Constitution, as merely part of a political, a larger picture, rather than as the controlling text, a standalone text. Thank you.
May tanong pa ba? Ibang estudyante, faculty, other members of the audience? Wala na si Gary. Ayaw na magsalita ni Gary. Diba? Ibig ko sa puntong ito, basahin yung pinadala ni Atty. Sakisan. Parang punto por punto, gaya ng ginawa ni Dean Bajongan, bawat may tanong at ang tugon. So, doon sa unang tanong, paano pinasangkapan ni Marcos ang batas upang maisakatuparan at panatilihin ang sarili at mga kaalyadong politiko sa kapangyarihan. Ito ang tugon ni Atty. Sagisan. Naging super executive, super court, super legislature at one-man constitutional convention, Amendment number 6 si McCoy. Mas matindi kung ang mensahe ay the First Lady wants this. Okay. So yun yung tugon. Yung pangalawang tanong, bakit hindi gaano pinag-uusapan ang naging pagbuo sa legal na malangkas na sumuporta sa diktatorya? Ang tugon ay pangamba at lagim. Sanay ang Pinoy na maging lahing alipin, Kastila, Ingles, Kano, Hapon, Kano ulit at Ilocano ang naghaharing uri. Saludo tayo. Okay. Pangatlong tanong. Ito. Daming tanong. Maraming tanong. Anyway, basahin ko yung tanong. Pagkaraniwan dahilan na ibinibigay ng mga grupo at individual na naging bahagi ng Rehimen Marcos na pinagsisilbihan nila ang diktatorya sa paniniwalang maaari nilang mabawasan ang rahas ng kamay na bakal ni Marcos kung sila ay nasa kapangyarihan. Maaari kayang may parehong sentimiento ang judikatura, lalo na ang kataas-taasang hukuman sa usaping ito. Ano kaya ang maaaring ginawa ng judikatura